So for bacteria or any pathogen, I always use bacteria as my go-to, but for a pathogen to be able to cause a disease, it has to have certain characteristics that make it more likely to cause a disease. And so one of those characteristics is its virulence. So the virulence is the ability to cause a disease. And so factors within the pathogen that allow it to cause disease would be things that allow it to adhere to a host, penetrate the host cell, stay away from the host's immune system, and cause damage to the host. And here are a series of bacteria that have certain characteristics that influence their virulence. The dose, so the amount of pathogen required to cause a disease. So if you have a dose that's below minimum, typically you're not going to have a disease. You may have an asymptomatic infection, but the immune system is oftentimes going to be able to clear out that infection before any symptoms actually occur. If you have a very large dose, this can produce a very serious disease, even if an individual has a good immune system. So the amount of pathogen required is that dose. The incubation period then is the period of time between when the pathogen is given to a new host, or when a host gets that new pathogen, and the time that the symptoms and signs actually occur. So if you have a short incubation period, you're not going to spread that pathogen very far. But with long incubation periods, you can actually spread the pathogen all over the world. An example, in 1963, typhoid fever hit a ski resort in Switzerland. 10,000 individuals drank water containing Salmonella enterica serotype typhi. The incubation period is 10 to 14 days. And so individuals that were at that ski resort ended up going back home and went to a minimum of 6 different countries and spread that disease. So long incubation periods can actually cause, can lead to pandemics, potentially. There are also host factors that influence disease. So one example is the immunity to a pathogen. So you can become immune to a pathogen because you've had that disease before, or you have had immunizations. And this immunity to a pathogen actually protects individuals who are immunocompromised. So if you have an individual that can't get a vaccination, they are going to be dependent on everyone else around them getting the vaccination to protect them. Now, if a pathogen changes, that can change this immunity, because if you have a pathogen that changes, now the population wouldn't be immune anymore. Which is why, an example, every year we get a flu vaccine. And every year you have to get a different flu vaccine because the influenza virus changes very consistently every year. Health of an individual. So if you're healthy, then you're going to be less likely to get sick. Your immune system is going to be healthier. If you don't get proper nutrition, if you don't get enough sleep, if you're in an environment where there's a lot of crowding or there's poor sanitation, then you're more likely to get disease. Your age is going to be a factor. Typically, the most susceptible are the individuals that are super young and very old. Whereas individuals that are in their young adulthood or middle age are going to be the most protected. And so part of this is because you have a good immune system and you're still going to the doctor on a regular basis and updating your immunizations, usually because you have children and grandchildren. Young individuals have not developed that immune system, and older individuals don't tend to update their vaccines as often, and their immune system starts to degrade as they get old. So they're less healthy in general. Your gender can influence the disease that you get. So women are more likely to develop urinary tract infections, and there's a reason for this. We have a shorter urethra. Male urethras are very long. They go all the way through the penis to the bladder. Females have a very small urethra that runs from, the external environment to the bladder. Pregnant women are more susceptible to listeriosis. Now, I looked, and there's a lot of studies that talk about how pregnant women are more susceptible to listeriosis, but none of them explained why. So I can't explain why that would be. But apparently, pregnant women are more susceptible. And if a pregnant woman gets listeriosis, even if she has the less detrimental side effects or symptoms, like just a small fever, a little discomfort, they can still pass that to their child, and their child could actually be aborted. So spontaneous abortion or a miscarriage could occur. So it is very important to take care of your food and to wash everything and to avoid certain types of foods when you're pregnant. Religions can actually influence disease. So breastfeeding provides protections from infants. And so that would be more of a cultural practice, not so much a religious practice. But individuals who, and another cultural practice would be consuming raw fish. So there are certain areas where consumption of raw fish is a cultural practice, and they're more likely to get certain types of tapeworms because they eat these raw fish in these areas where the fish are often riddled with tapeworms. But religious practices, so in certain religions, you are fasting for long periods of time. That's going to influence your health. There are certain practices where there are certain foods you can't eat, and that would also have an influence on your health. If you're not allowed to eat any type of pork, then pork tapeworm would be less likely to, or you would be less likely to ingest pork tapeworm, and so you wouldn't get that disease. Your genetics, of course, your genetics are going to influence your ability to get disease because your genetics are what make up your immunity. So you get half your immune system from mom and half from dad, and that's going to make up your immune system. Your genes also code for the different types of receptors that are found within your cells. And so Plasmodium vivax can't infect red blood cells that are, or that don't have normal hemoglobin. And so those individuals can't get malaria. HIV can only infect helper T cells that have a specific type of receptor on the surface. If the HIV cell, or if the surface helper T cell doesn't have that cell receptor, then HIV cannot infect that individual. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll get into the different areas that work in the field of epidemiology. All right, so I'll talk to you soon. Bye.